The next time you need auto parts and accessories, trust the parts professionals at the 102 Chicagoland O'Reilly Auto Parts stores. Our professional parts people know what it takes to get the job done right. Professionals have counted on O'Reilly Auto Parts for decades. Now you can too. Professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts. Better parts, better prices every day. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It is Friday night. Mercury is out of retrograde, and it's Paranormal Review Radio. What can be better than that? Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Anthony in New York.
And I'm Luci in Chicago. You're listening to one of the highest-rated paranormal radio shows on Blog Talk. No bull, no lies, just a true platform for everyone to share their knowledge and experiences. When searching for the truth, good communication is key. Our phone lines are open for questions or stories. The call-in number is 661-244-9831. Our chat room is also open, so you can type in your questions or comments as well. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Paranormal Review Radio. You'll find more articles, blogs, and full show uploads. And if you have specific questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show, email us at paranormal.review@aol.com. Now, sit back, get comfy, and prepare to open your minds. It's time for Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, ever since the spiritual revolution began at the turn of the century, many people have been trying to build the most effective way to communicate with the dead. It wasn't until 1980 when George Meek and Bill O'Neill, who created the Spiricom, did people start to be more enthusiastic about talking with the dead. This opened the floodgates, and more devices were born. Frank Supton exploded onto the scene with the infamous Frank's box as we know today, and the rest is history. Some may say the idea that spirit voices can somehow be heard through rapidly tuning radio frequencies has baffled the non-paranormal world and has almost, if not completely, set the paranormal field years behind. However, others feel as though the Ghost Box is an absolute true piece of equipment that should be cherished and respected. Whatever side you stand on tonight, Luci and I will hopefully enlighten and educate both corners and come to a more realistic and somewhat scientific approach to the spirit voices that we all claim to hear. Michael J. Baker is the founder of New England Center for Advancement of Paranormal Science, or NECAPS.org, and the new website, theperianelement.com, in which Michael approaches every aspect of the paranormal from a scientific and psychoanalytical approach that to many just makes sense. The experimental studies Michael and his team create has proven to be something we all should stop and think about. Tonight, Michael tackles the infamous Ghost Box theory and will hopefully change the way that you think about this particular device, as well as maybe the paranormal in general. So buckle your seatbelts, boys and girls. Tonight's going to be a bumpy ride. Please help me in welcoming Michael J. Baker to the show. Hey, Michael, thanks for coming back on the show with us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
Hi, Michael. You know, it's been a while since we've had you on the show. So what's been going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, it's been pretty exciting. With any kind of research over time, you change directions. You try new things, you build different gadgets, you try different experiments, and it progresses on. And over the past couple of years, we've been focusing a lot on human perception because we feel that it's a very relevant argument in paranormal research. To understand how people perceive things and understand things, if anything, regardless of what you might believe, personally, the understanding human perceptions is going to help you sort through a lot of the stuff that you might encounter in researching. So we've been sinking our teeth into that, which it's been very enlightening.
Well, we talked about this last time you were on, about how science and the paranormal became your life's path. And you even mentioned how you used to put together computers when you were a child. But can you share with everyone how you got into the paranormal and how you then incorporated science into it?
Well, my interest in it goes back to when I was 6, 7 years old. I mean, I've had it since then because my family was, we believed that we had something going on in the house we grew up in. So it was always interesting to me. It was always a question, and my family would never really talk to me about it because I was just a little kid, and they didn't want to get into big discussions. And even as I grew up, they just kind of avoided the subject. So it was always that big question mark hanging out there for me. So over time, I went through a bunch of different types of, entrepreneurial paths where I went from DJing to videography, and once I got into videography, I wanted to do something creative, so I put together a documentary film that was supposed to be 10 minutes long, and I thought, I need a subject that's going to hold my attention through this whole process, and I thought, paranormal was something that I always had an interest in, so I put out an ad on Craigslist, which was the big thing at the time, and I looked for groups to go out with, and video, and to my surprise, my mailbox filled up, and I couldn't stop at any particular point. I had to go out with every single one of them, and this couple of month project turned into 2.5 years, and I went out with everybody that I could imagine, with exorcists, with witches, with psychics, with scientific-based groups, with anybody that you can think of that's any realm of paranormal research. And as I was out there with them, I saw how the techniques were being applied, which was a lot of what you might see on TV. And I have a history in electronics engineering, and I've always been very keen on science. I've always loved science, and I saw that a lot of the methods and the equipment that were being used really wasn't effective in what they were trying to search for. And so I started to make my own equipment and alter the equipment that was out there, and started applying, out of my own curiosity, these techniques. And it kind of just sucked me right in, and I've been doing it now for 11 years.
Well, you mentioned television, and it seems that paranormal television shows, they've been a huge influence on their audience and the rise in paranormal groups. Anthony and I think the hype in these shows may be on its downfall, but how can reality be misguided by these shows?
Well, the problem is anything when you're dealing with media and anything with a budget to promote itself, you're going to develop these heroes that you see on television you're going to look up to them as respected, especially when it's labeled as a reality show. Obviously, you watch The Big Bang Theory, you're not going to, you're not going to go to Sheldon Cooper and ask him a bunch of physics questions off the air, because you realize it's not a reality show. But when you're looking at shows where they claim to get these people who are experts in these fields, you're going to listen to them a little bit differently, as the general public is going to. So you start to watch what they do, you start to pick up the patterns, and they're saying it's working, so you have no reason outwardly to dispute it if they're the ones being paid to be on a television show with it. But that's where the problem comes in, because a lot of people are failing to do research on their own, and they're just following the leader. And the leader is really the person who's producing the film, who really doesn't care about the aspect of research at all. They care about putting together a good show. And so you're going to be, you're going to be behind if you're following the path that these people are taking.
Well, Michael, you mentioned before your study in perception, sort of that road that you're going down, and you'll probably hear Luci say tonight that she doesn't know how the ghost box works. She just knows that it works and she believes that it does. And, I'm sure that there are many other people out there who are even listening right now feel the same way that she does. But how much can belief negatively affect paranormal research?
It affects it quite a bit. There's actually a lot of studies that, in fact, I recently posted a study on this particular subject, actually. And it was a research study done by a man named Michael Nees and Charlotte Phillips. It was from the Lafayette College Department of Psychology. And their results showed a significant effect of instructional condition, which means participants who were told that the experiment was about paranormal were significantly more likely to respond that they were hearing voices, as opposed to people who were, told that the study was about voices in noisy environments. So what they found is, and there's other research, there's a lot of other papers that actually back this up. What they found is that the belief can actually taint your perception. And so it was consistent. There was a big study also done in Thailand with the same type of result, where they were comparing people with paranormal belief compared to people without paranormal belief. And the perceptions, even just general perceptions, were thrown off because of these beliefs. So the reason being is that you're throwing in something that belief by its very nature does not need research. So they never make good bedfellows. They mix like oil and water, because you don't need to research something if you believe it. And
right. It's almost like having the answer already, and why bother, researching it?
Right. The belief is the end of the story. And so if you have questions, you don't have a solid belief. So they really don't mix well when you're mixing two types of people that are, one that's going out looking for a lot of answers, and other people think they've already found them, and they're exploring it. So there's a lot of clash going on in society, and between groups and scientific-minded people and people who are spiritually oriented. They're going to battle because one person already thinks they have the answer, and they don't need to research it if they personally believe it. But the conflict comes when the people who are believing a certain thing, which is fine to believe whatever you want. The problem is putting forth things as fact, as a fact for everybody, is where you start to get into conflicts with people. I've witnessed it. You've witnessed it. Anybody in the paranormal field has witnessed it, where people battle over those types of things, and it can get pretty heated.
Well, before we get into the Ghost Bix discussion, I noticed that you started a new website called the Pierian Element, and I've heard of the Pierian Springs, or spring, which I think in Greek mythology is some sort of sacred place for knowledge. Is this website a sacred place of knowledge?
Well, it's the element of the Pierian Spring, which is, it's there for knowledge, and that's why on there we're going to be posting, which we already have. We have a pretty good library of peer-reviewed scientific research relating to the subject of exploring the unknown. There's going to be, once I finish typing them all out, a lot of the experiments that we've done are going to be posted there. And it's really more to just help people learn about things that other people have done in peer-reviewed research. And the reason I value peer-reviewed research so much is because when you have a third party or a fourth party even independently verifying the results that you received, that you produced, now you have something that's very compelling, and it's much more significant in terms of being able to identify things or form theories or even future hypotheses. So I really love the idea of peer review, and I love the idea of documentation, an independent review. I think that's fantastic. Sometimes you get results, if you publish a experiment or a study on an experiment and other people find completely the opposite, that's actually very interesting too. I mean, it could be a little bit of a letdown for the person who did the original research, but it also allows them to rethink and reproduce their results and find out what the difference was, why they got results and the other people didn't. It makes people think, and it makes the data much more valuable, in my opinion.
Sure, and it puts it more on a professional level. You know,
it does.
It brings it to the forefront that you're thinking about it more intelligently, and you're able to research it more intelligently, and therefore, hopefully, get a more intelligent answer or solve the riddle more intelligently.
That's right. That's right. And not only that, the standard scientific community is going to take you a lot more seriously if you've done peer-reviewed research and you've had other independent people repeat your results. It really is the golden key that you need to get more interest and even in some cases funding for research.
Well, my next question, I may go back to sort of what we were just talking about right before I mentioned the Pierian element, but do you find that there's a battle between the reality of common scientific knowledge and the knowledge and beliefs of the paranormal community? So, like, if there's a more plausible answer to something, do you feel the paranormal community in general resist it because it combats their perception of their reality of the paranormal?
Yes. The short answer would be yes. I mean, what happens is people have a perception of what they want, and everybody, and myself included, everybody is subject to cognitive biases, and confirmation biases, where you have your own belief, and even subconsciously, you can cherry pick the things that support your cause without even realizing it, and thinking that you're validating something that's very important that also proves your point. And that is a dangerous road to be down. You have to really be careful about letting that happen, because what happens is you tend to lump all of the meat of what you're researching to one side, and it becomes unbalanced. And that's another reason I like independent verification, because that's where you break up the whole idea of confirmation bias. You have other people who have different biases of their own, and when you get multiple research, it balances itself out, and you get a much more clear picture. But yes, people do tend to resist things that go against what they feel deep down, even if it's subconsciously, even if they don't think they're doing it. It does happen.
Well, you know what, Michael? I may be the underdog here, and I may have to fight my way up. But I do believe that Ghost Bix works, okay? It may not work every time, and there may be some words that are from the radio frequencies, but it seems that most of the time that we use it, the responses, they're intelligent, and they're accurate to the questions. How can that be?
Well, there's two aspects to understanding the whole deal with the Ghost Bix. And one deals with the equipment itself, and whether the scientific structure of it, and whether it's capable of doing what is being claimed. And then the other side has to do with my favorite thing going on lately is the human perception of it and how it's interpreted. And I think to answer part of your question there, the statistical averages are very important when you're dealing with devices that give you responses. You have to have, I know that you're getting answers that feel that they are answering questions directly, but believe it or not, that is not a very difficult thing to achieve when you're dealing even with random results. I made a device, a probability device, where I took, it was back in the day when they were talking about the obelisk, for example, where it spits out words. We're on the Ghost Bix subject, but I want to talk a bit about this particular thing because it's relevant to your question. It takes the 4,096 words that are in the obelisk 10, and it randomly spits out the words at random times. And it's all the words that are contained in that obelisk. And the tests that I've done with people, even people in my own group, they leave it on, and it starts to say things that are very relevant to their environment and directly answers some of the questions that they are asking in conversations with their loved ones or friends or people in the group. The device will actually answer them, but this is completely random software. There's no sensing devices in it at all. And the commonality of it is actually about 30 or 40% of the time you're going to get an intelligent response. And that's not statistically significant. For you to get results that are statistically significant, you'd have to get it 85 or greater, 85% of the time or greater. And you should be able to go back to that location, ask the same questions, and get the same result. And you can't, because in science, it's all about demonstrability, being able to repeat the results. And if you can't do that, you don't have anything that breaks that statistics barrier. So it's a difficult thing. I know that it appears as though there's intelligence going on, but it has to be much more significant than just a few answers that match. Even if there's 10 in a row, it's not even enough to break that statistical barrier. You could flip a coin and get 10 heads in a row. It's not that difficult to take a coin, or that unheard of, rather, to flip a coin 10 times and call heads every time and get it right. It's not that unusual. Or to take dice and roll them 10 times and call it. People in casinos do it all the time at the craps table. So why is it that unusual to get a random answer that happens to match your question? It's not that unusual.
Well, I understand what you're saying about, statistical results, but in my mind, it just seems like, going to a same location, going back to a location, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that you should be getting the same responses. If you believe in spirits, maybe not the same spirit is in that location. Maybe they've moved on. Different groups can go into the same location and get similar answers. I mean, that's the part that I'm having having a hard time wrapping my head around the statistical, like if it's there, it should happen the same all the time. And there are locations that you can go in, and one night it'll be very active, the next night it won't be.
Right. Well, if you're talking about something that's giving you an intelligent answer, it should be able to answer you repeatedly in that sense. You shouldn't have any point where it doesn't answer you correctly. If it really is answering you intelligently or answering you directly, it should be able to recognize you, or if these spirits are there, or if there's something there, you should get a better result out of it. And that goes to this being said, that if this is the case, if what you're saying is correct, it still doesn't have enough scientific legs to hold any kind of consideration, because it needs to break that barrier before it can be significant, because it does not fall at this point out of the realm of chance. It's still just in the realm of chance, even though it seems very realistic. Right now we have something that's equally divided, where, when you look at something in science, and if you're going to assume the fantastical solution as opposed to the normal, the normal solution that might be presented in a science committee, we should just then accept everything that is fantastical, which really doesn't make any sense, because then you could say, well, there's unicorns here and they have aliens on their back, and we can't just automatically assume that side. We have to take the things that are rationalized. And, if we have a 50-50 split here of, yes, you haven't broken that realm of chance, but you're saying that it's an intelligent response, we have no way of qualifying that. It's a difficult subject. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. I know a lot of people that when you have a personal experience, it's very hard to tell somebody that the personal experience really wasn't that dramatic in the sense of all things. Because it was very impactful to you as a person, Yeah,
I fall into that group. But I want to ask a question about the ghost box. I mean, we all know how it works. I mean, it sweeps through the radio channels, creating white noise and fragments of words. But supposedly, in between that white noise, we're supposedly able to hear the spirits talking to us. Now, if spirits can talk to us without radio and tools, why couldn't they use the energy to speak in real time from the radio?
Well, let me go take a step back there for a second. And
Okay.
you said that everybody knows how the spirit box works, but I don't think everybody really knows how radio works. And if I could take just a minute to explain how radio works, it will help understand the next part of what I'm going to say. I'll say this really quickly. So let's say you want to make a radio and broadcast music. If you take an MP3 player and plug it into an amplifier and replace the speaker with just a properly wound coil of wire, you will, instead of hearing the music, broadcast the music in electromagnetic waves. This is, in essence, a radio signal, okay? The signal can be heard by using another coil of wire somewhere off in the end of the room, plugged into another amplifier, kind of like a microphone, and then out to a speaker. So basically the signal will go into the amplifier, out through the coil, broadcast through the air, then into the coil where it's transferred back into an audio signal. And this is generally how radio works. That makes sense so far, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or no? Okay. Well, it was discovered that transmitting signals like this over long distances was not very practical, because to make a system like that efficient, you would need a huge coil of wire to act as an antenna. And even then, there's just too much natural phenomena that could interfere with such a low-frequency signal. Things like the sun and strange frequencies from the atmosphere, etc., can all interfere with a transmission like that. So to fix the problem, radio makers and designers, they decided that they should basically attach or merge the signal, that music, to a higher frequency that's not affected by those things. And doing that will let them use a shorter antenna and go longer distances without issue. And that higher frequency is called a carrier frequency, because it carries the signal you want to hear through the air to the radio receiver without being affected by the environment. You can kind of think of it like an airplane for audio signals. The whole process of using a carrier frequency is a thing called modulation, and that's where this whole theory falls apart. So now, without getting into anything that's really too complicated, there are several ways to modulate a signal. One way is to add the signal to the carrier frequency and combine the strength of them. This is called amplitude modulation, and we know it as AM radio. The other way is to vary the carrier frequency in a proportional way to the signal you want to send. In other words, if your signal is increasing or decreasing in frequency, then you decrease the carrier frequency proportionately. And this method is called frequency modulation, and we know it as FM radio. And the important thing to know here is that once a signal has been modulated, it can only be heard if you demodulate it and in the receiver. So in other words, you have to remove that carrier frequency from the mix before you can hear the transmission. And that's what our radios and the spirit box do. They receive the transmission and demodulate it so we can hear it. Otherwise, it would never be heard. And that's where a lot of the claims of this being able to do what it's saying is impossible. There's an important part. In the world of radio broadcasts, the International Telecommunications Union are the ones who control what chunk of frequencies are assigned to what type of radio broadcasts all around the world. They're like the UN of radio. And in other words, they decide what frequencies can be used to broadcast these AM and FM transmissions, and this is how radio stations determine what carrier frequency they can use when modulating their signals. So for example, 105.7 FM is modulated on a carrier frequency of 105.7 megahertz. And we obviously can't hear frequencies that high, so our radio removes that 105.7 megahertz, and we're left with the voices and music we want to hear. So that's how the whole radio system works. So that being said, here's my problem with the logic of spirit boxes. The carrier signal is chosen by a committee of people. It's not just a natural selection. And the range of FM and AM broadcasts are also chosen, like 88 to 100 FM. So let's, for the sake of discussion, say that spirits do exist, and that's a separate discussion, but right now it's moot. So let's just say they exist. For the spirit voice to be detected on a radio receiver, it would need to be modulated just like the radio broadcasts, modulated on a man-made chosen frequency, because the spirit box, just like a radio, demodulates signals as it receives beforehand. It's tuned to receive frequencies in the hundreds of thousands to millions. That's not a normal transmission for voice. In fact, it's a man-chosen type of frequency. So it makes no sense that a natural phenomena would be communicating in a modulated frequency. Modulation is a man-made thing. So, in other words, the spirit box would have to use the same carrier frequencies that were chosen by a human committee in order to communicate. If that were true, it would be the granddaddy of all coincidences. And so my first question is, if you're going to try and communicate as a spirit, why use such an impossible frequency, and why modulate at all? The other part of this is, if the spirit boxes, as we know, they scan frequencies consecutively at the interval you choose, and it doesn't stop. It goes from one to the next and whatever second interval you choose. So it outputs small bits of words or phrases that the user interprets as communication. If you, as a spirit, could broadcast your voice over modulated radio, why would you break up your statement into tiny little hard-to-understand chunks that are spread out randomly over 100 potential frequencies that happen to be in line with the frequencies chosen by the radio stations, frequencies which don't repeat state to state? So it's not like it's a universal frequency that you just happen to find the spirit code. It changes state to state. And why wouldn't you simply broadcast on one radio station and just be clear? It's like it's like writing your message on one or two puzzle pieces in each of 100 puzzles that are 1,000 pieces each and expecting people to understand. People purport these as intelligent messages, but that method alone is really, in my opinion, anything but intelligent. It's not a logical method. It wouldn't make any sense. In fact, it just seems impossible that the spirit world happens to communicate on the same frequencies chosen by the UTI.
Absolutely interesting, and I think that is the best explanation that I have heard. And Michael, just so you know that I'm here sitting with Skype with Luci, and I'm shaking my head up and down, yes, yes, to everything that you're talking about, and Luci's just making faces at me. But wait.
Just so you know, Luci, I'm not trying to put anybody's beliefs down. I deal with this in my own perspective, and that I'm just saying this from my perspective of it. So I don't want to come across as
it's a perfectly logical answer, and you've broken it down to the point where it is almost simplistically explained and spread out to the point where, just as what you said, why would a spirit want to break up their voice into a million fragments when they could just take over a station themselves if they are able to create that energy, if they are so choosing to, and speak through this Ghost Box machine? Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just take over one radio station? All you have to do is just tune to it and listen to them.
You have to also understand, too, why wouldn't people be hearing fragments of unrelated voices in their car radios? Because it's the same technology tuner that's used in the spirit box, same one. This device is a consumer-level, mass-produced radio scanner. It was made not for the intention of listening to disincarnate beings, but for scanning modulated broadcast frequencies. And radios aren't new, I mean, this has been going on a while. Why is it so recently that these voices? I know that Frank's Box and back in on the day, they were claiming to have that as well. But the standard radio is listened to in millions of cars every morning, and nobody's hearing bits of voices that aren't making sense. There's a good test that I had done with this. A friend of mine has a spirit box, and we did some tests with it. And there's anybody else can do this test, which is pretty interesting. I examined the spirit box, and what I did it alongside a thing called software-defined radio. And software-defined radio is, if you use software-defined radio in the appropriate software and receiver or multiple receiver combinations, you can record every single radio station in the FM and AM band simultaneously. 20,000 frequencies for FM. And so what this means is that you can go back to the time you heard a spirit on the spirit box and listen to the full station broadcast that the spirit box was receiving at the time. And during the spirit box session, people identify these things, the communications. And so far, I have never encountered one that has not been a segment of a normal radio broadcast. Even on the ones that seem like they're intelligent, they're simply segments of normal radio broadcasts, either misunderstood or coincidental matchups.
Okay.
And
I'm hearing what you're saying, Michael. Okay, I do understand that. But going back to what you're saying, that, people don't hear voices. Some people have, and someone posted in the chat room, some people have heard voices when listening to a radio in their phone. Some people have heard something. In fact, we've done a phone call to someone where we've heard a voice. It's almost like I'm having such a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that, like you say, a spirit, why wouldn't they just choose one station to broadcast on? In my mind, it doesn't seem that a spirit would know how to do that. I mean, if you didn't know how to do that on this side, all of a sudden you go to the other side and you've got this technical knowledge that you could do these things?
Well, there you go right there. Because in order for it to come across the spirit box, the spirit would have to have the technical knowledge to know how to modulate its voice to 105.7 megahertz, for example. And it would have to know how to do that and broadcast it only on specific stations. You see, in the FM band, there are 20,000 possible frequencies, and only 100 of them are used for FM radio. And those ones that are chosen vary from state to state. And so this spirit would have to know, I'm in Massachusetts. Let's see, I can use 104.1, I can use 99.5, and then know how to modulate its voice to a frequency higher than what's capable for anybody to hear, way beyond. We can only hear up to 20,000 hertz. And then broadcast over a radio, because the spirit box it is incapable of hearing anything below 535,000 hertz. It doesn't have the tuner for that. It only listens to 535 hertz to 1630 for AM, and then 88 million to 108 million on FM. And then it listens for those frequencies, and when it finds them, it demodulates them. So regular voice will not come over. That's the reason they use modulation, because they were getting interference from all kinds of things. So they had to modulate in order to get rid of the interference. So for a spirit to know how to do that makes no sense to me. Not only know how to do that, but to know all of the frequencies they need in each state. I mean, they have a database? It makes no sense.
Okay, wait. So we're assuming that the same rules that apply to the radio and the frequencies hold on the other side. We don't truly know that, do we?
We know that the spirit box will receive frequencies 535,000 hertz and above. So if it's picking up a voice, it means it demodulated something to get that voice, which regular voice transmitted like the basic description that I said with the amplifier and the coil, that's a normal voice transmission. I could understand something being picked up in something like that. But we're talking about high frequency transmissions that are modulated, and it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. They'd have to have two frequencies in their voice, and one of them has to match with what was chosen by the radio stations. I don't understand why that would be. Why, if you're going to communicate, why would that even be possible? Why would you want? That doesn't make sense.
Michael, would you say that also applies to those ITC sessions when people have the televisions on that snowy channel and they see figures come through? Would that same logic apply to that as well?
Well, well, on TV, yes, because TV is also ultra-high frequency. FM and UHF are very closely related, and same thing with AM and VHF. They're all within the same band. And like I said, that band is universal for the entire world, but each state and each country chooses which parts of that band they want to use for their radio station. So, yeah, it would be very similar when you're dealing with voices and such like that. I could understand if there was an interference glitch that caused something to black out or some static or something like that that might be affecting it. But for it to be voices over that, it has to be part of the system. And unless there's some spirit or something inside of a radio station affecting the equipment there to broadcast their voice, I can't imagine that this would be the case. I mean, like I said, it's my perspective, of course, you know, but I just can't wrap my head around the science of how that would work, because the spirit box itself is just not capable of doing what it's claiming to have happen. Not from a natural phenomena. And most natural phenomena is low frequency. The Earth is 7.87 hertz. The Sun is 8 hertz. Our brain waves only go to 40 hertz. All the natural phenomena in the world is low frequency, not high frequencies. High frequencies, you're dealing with radiation from decaying isotopes and space, stuff like that. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. It's really what, whether I'm wrong or not, I don't know. That's what science is about. When information comes to change my mind, I'll change my mind in a heartbeat. But it's just, it doesn't make sense that it's possible.
Well, I think Luci may have a case of pareidolia, and for those, and I may not be saying that word correctly, but Pareidolia, pareidolia, and for those of you not familiar with it, it's sort of the idea of, it's the brain function of creating something known out of the unknown, or from chaos, simply put. Would you define Luci's results and people's results like Luci of a Ghost Bix session a case of just pareidolia?
Well, it's a matter of, like I was saying at the beginning, that old research study that was just recently done actually ties in a strong belief in paranormal to affect perceptions to a degree. And, we have a lot of biases. I do too. I have biases where I lean towards one way or another, and it's very difficult to break free of that. It's not an easy task to do, so I don't fault anybody for having, for standing beside what they feel. I think that's fine. But it's a matter of having an idea of critical thinking and rationalization, where you have to look at it, you have to take a step back and say, wait a minute, does this thing really even have the possibility of doing this thing first? And then if it does, am I thinking something too wrong here? So that's what experimentation is for, to get independent people to look at it and see how it all comes together. And like I said, with that software-defined radio, that's a wonderful test, because anybody who gets a hit and says, oh, I just heard a voice that was definitely a voice, you can go back and listen to the radio, and you can find that the word Sam or I'm here or whatever that was, whatever that phrase was, you can listen to the entire thing and realize that, it's just a radio broadcast somewhere with an entire sentence or paragraph attached to that one little phrase you think is from a deceased person living in the home. I have not yet found, and I have a lot of recordings of this, and I've gone through this a bunch. I have yet to hear anybody that has had a voice that was not tied to a radio station. And it's an ongoing task. I mean, I'm not going to give up. I'll keep testing as long as the phenomena is out there or being claimed, because I would like that to happen. I would love this thing to happen. But in my opinion, why does this only occur on a modified device that's sold by companies that profit off of you believing it works? If that to me is a red flag, it's I don't like people who sell devices like that. I think they're modern snake oil, if you ask me. I think they're taking advantage of people who want to believe something and just don't understand yet. I think it's irresponsible, in my opinion.
Well, speaking of profiting off of the beliefs of others, one of the new concepts that I have a huge problem with now are these Ghost Bix apps. And, I if anything, I may tend to believe more of the Frank's box, the raw audio player, than a programmed software with already selected audio. This, to me, can be manipulated and much more biased than a Frank's box. What are your thoughts on this app thing?
Well, I agree with you. Like I said, what they do is they have the selection of words, and it plays off of the sensors that are in the phone, and it triggers specific things with specific readings. And so the basic principle is there, but the problem is the words that are chosen. Could you imagine if you had to communicate and you could only use a small selection of words that were chosen for you to communicate with? If that was the case, we're looking at it as even something that's logistic. It doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, in that if you go to paranormalnewengland.com/probabilities, you'll see the device that I made there with the Ovilus words. And what you notice about the words is that if you're in a place that has a history or claimed haunting history, all of the words seem to match that kind of theme. And so it's going to be very, very easy to tie the history and the story to whatever this is spitting out. Even just before we were doing that, I actually added a new feature so it actually talks now. And I was sitting here with my wife tonight, and we were sitting there watching television, and it was naming all the stuff that we were seeing on television. And we were laughing about it because, oh, wow, it knows, but it really doesn't know. It's just software. And it's very hard for, when you get hits, everybody notices the hits, and nobody counts the misses. Because it's very easy just to dismiss the fact when they're missing, and what you're waiting for is the hit, so it's very impactful. It sticks with you and you remember it. So all you need is a few hits to make you feel encouraged, even though you may have had 25, 40, 50 misses or incorrect guesses at that stage. So it's kind of forcing it into a positive. You get a false positive out of the whole thing.
Well, in addition, you talk about sort of this programmed Ovilus thing with a Ghost Bix app. They're basically taking what you would normally hear from a rapidly tuning radio station and putting it on to software. Either you can have it on your phone or your laptop or computer. And the claims are it's supposed to act the same way, but you don't have to have an actual physical box. But what I found out is what they're doing is they're actually programming this software to include certain and specific radio stations, online radio stations, that they're pulling from and sort of linking this app to. And so the bias there is that they're linking to radio stations that are online that deal with the paranormal. So, like, for instance, for tonight, so if they would have linked to our show tonight and had it on some Ghost Bix app, we've already said the word spirit. We've already said the word ghost. We've said all of these things that if they would have rapidly have gone through, that would have popped up, and automatically people would believe, oh, my God, it just said spirit, it said ghost, it said devil, it said whatever.
It's a matter of time.
Exactly. And I think that's what is bothering me is that people are not realizing that these apps are specifically targeting a database that is intended to give them what they want. And for me, I would tend to believe more of a regular Frank's box, a physical Frank's box, than these apps, and that's what is really bothering me. And I'm seeing this trend more towards apps. People are getting rid of these physical items and going towards the software, which is bothering me.
Well, it's because they're getting more hits on them. The thing is, if let's say, for example, you took 10 spirit boxes and you put them in 10 houses that were neighbors side by side. You started them all at precisely the same time. Do you think you would get the same results in each?
No.
In each home? You may. Because it's scanning the same radio frequencies. You're in the same area of broadcast. That's one element that you could do. People who are, I know there's groups out there that use spirit boxes. That would be a great test. turn them all on and put them in different locations and record them simultaneously, time and date stamp, and then play them all back together. You should be getting the same results. Unless the the broadcast area is weak or the house is preventing some of the frequencies, then some other words may pop up. So I guess you have to make sure that it's stable. But what I'm trying to imply is that try experimenting with it. Try to find the fallibility in it yourself and prove it to yourself that, yes, this thing is picking up things that are not on the radio station. Software-defined radio is free. The receiver for it to record even a chunk of them is very cheap. It's only $20. So you can actually get a bunch of them, hook them all into a computer, and record the radio stations while you're doing your Spirit Box session, and go back and qualify your hits. I guarantee you, from what I've seen so far, you're not going to find one that's not radio broadcast.
Okay. I'm going to admit I don't understand that if the Ghost Box units, they're supposed to scan quickly through the stations. I understand what you're saying about, the fragments that may be broadcast on there. And we've talked about, getting hits, short work. But I have heard full sentences. How can this be?
How do you know what you heard was correct? See, there's another issue, too. I actually put out a paper about a year ago now, on the linguistics of EVP recording, because that's something that touches to this subject a little bit. And the perceptions of EVP, what I did was I created a test with EVPs that I created myself. My group actually helped create them. We recorded them, fake EVPs, to make them sound like real EVPs, little pieces, but they're human spoken words, and we knew exactly what was being said because we made them up. And we put them in a test, and we let people hear them, and they were only right 30% of the time that they were hitting it. So the average, we had some people that got up as high as 60, 70. I think there was even one up into 80%. But the majority of the people, and we're talking, over 100 and I forget what it was, 140 or whatever it is, it was 30% of the time that they were accurate, because they could not, everybody who records EVP knows that nobody agrees on what's being said, and the minute you say what you think it is, you've pre-programmed everybody's brain to say, oh yeah, now I hear it. And so that's the problem there in that respect. But so it's the same thing with this Spirit Box, because you're hearing words, you're not completely sure about what you're saying. There was a research study conducted in 2010 by Trevor Agus and 3 other researchers. It was called The Characteristics of Human Voice Processing. And what they found was that anomalies in ambient noise and environmental sounds can contain acoustic features that resemble the cues that define voice and stimuli as such. So, modern recording devices, they can pick up a wide variety of audible signals, and from, basically they have spectral and temporal properties that can be perceived as voice-like, and especially after signal processing, amplification, etc. And people pick that up and they think that they know what they're hearing. The cognitive biases affect your hearing, and there's a lot of papers on it. If you go to the Pierian element and just type in EVP, there's a lot of papers that talk about this type of phenomena. We're not accurate in what we're hearing. That's the problem. And it's probabilistically inevitable that over the course of hours of recording and virtually endless possible audio signal processing procedures and background noise additions, some anomalies in recording will be perceptually similar to voices. And we're going to hear what we want to hear when we're on a location. That's the thing. There's an old saying, if you go out looking for ghosts, you're going to find them, because everything that occurs, you're going to tie to that phenomena. And that's a danger in science research or any research, is to go looking for a specific answer. When you go out into scientific research, you're going with a completely empty mind. You don't know what you're looking for, period. And so it's a difficult thing. My argument to that statement, Luci, would be that how do you know that the statements you heard that was what you heard?
Okay, yeah, I see your side of it. But you know what? Okay, I do believe that the paranormal is beyond science. Okay, science is not going to be able to contain the things of the afterlife in a bottle to study it and examine it, just because it's not meant to be that way. So, in the back of your mind, do you feel that the ghost box or other pieces of equipment similar to this could be very well a source of communication, and that we're just too simplistic in dismissing it away?
Well, I think that there is a realm of possibility. I don't have any evidence for it at all. I think there's a realm of possibility that communication could be heard in the electromagnetic spectrum, just like radio frequencies are transmitted. But I do not believe that modulated frequencies contain voices from the dead. I think that, there's something to be said for listening to the electromagnetic spectrum. I have personally recorded strange EVPs. I recorded crying. I recorded Native American drums using just a coil that's listening to the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's not a radio broadcast. And so I know that there's some strange things going on in the electromagnetic field. Like I mentioned before, though, the problem with the spirit box is that it's modulated. It's a man-made device doing a man-made technical feature, and it just doesn't make sense that a spirit upon death or in another realm is automatically going to know about man-made radio technology, where half the people, I could go out on the street right now and ask them what a carrier frequency is or what station, or, what's the modulation frequency of AM. They wouldn't even know. So it doesn't make sense that they would all of a sudden know in another realm. And why would they know that? If you could know that kind of information, you could broadcast it on CB or shortwave or something and just keep talking. Shortwave and CB radio would get interference from other things. If this was on anything but a modulated frequency, there might be more of an argument, but it isn't. So that's where my problem is with it.
Well, Michael, has doing all these scientific and perceptual experiments within the paranormal, has it changed your perception of the afterlife in any way?
Yeah, actually it has. I started out with a very spiritual approach. I mean, when I was younger, I was afraid of ghosts. I had the whole, I was a kid, of course. I mean, growing up, even 10, 11 years old, I was afraid of it. And even when I grew up, and I was an adult, I always had this thought in the back of my head, oh yeah, there's something going on in this world. There's all this. This is before I started researching. But what I found out is that research and studying history and research and looking for things other people have done in a correct format, really science is the monster killer. Science is the ghost buster. Because it gives you a rationalization to understand that, I do believe there's something unusual going on in the world. I still believe that. I think that there's, because I've captured things that I can't explain, but the more I research, the more I don't think that there's an intelligence to it as of yet. Now, either these things cannot hear us, and they look completely innocuous to me because I have not seen signs of intelligence that have impressed me. So either they are not intelligent at all, and it's some kind of excess energy, I don't know what. I mean, I could take guesses all day long, but or it is a realm and they just do not respond to us. I don't know. I do believe something is out there as far as unusual phenomena, but it's been a long time. I've given up the ghost, and so to speak. I'm not focused on ghost research anymore because I really don't think that there's anything intelligent to interact with. I've tried every method I could possibly find in many controlled situations, and I just don't see it. If something comes up that will present new information to me, I will go where the correct information leads. But right now, my focus, aside from the perceptions, is trying to get the environment to replicate the phenomena. So I want to try to measure as much as I can to try to trigger whatever is going on demand, because the instant we can make something unusual like this demonstrable and repeatable, we can study it. And we can't really study it until we do that. In fact, I used to think that, I used to be like everybody else. You go out with a camera and audio recorders and video cameras. But the problem is you will never, ever, ever in a million years prove the existence of an unknown phenomena with a camera, audio recorder, or video camera. Ever. It's always going to be subjective evidence. Always. Because you don't have a way to repeat it. There's only one element that's going to get you to prove the existence of a phenomena, and that is to be able to repeat it, or at least predict it to some degree of accuracy. That's the only way it's ever going to happen. And so that's where my goal is. I know there are certain unusual things that happen. I want to try to trigger them and see if I can get them to repeat. And if I can, that'll be wonderful for everybody, including myself. But if I can't, well, somebody else might after me. Who knows?
Okay, you're saying that, the only way to prove it is to have it repeat. And the problem I have with that line right there is that if we are dealing with something that's intelligent, it just seems highly unlikely that you're going to get the same answers every single time. Every time you go to a particular location, that, the spirit is not going to identify itself, hi, this is Joe somebody, every single time.
Well, it's not an answer that we're looking for. It's phenomena repeating. So it's a matter of something that, to be able to trigger it, and get something to happen. Or if there's something intelligent out there, it should be able to repeat. If it wants to communicate or whatever. If it doesn't, we may be out of luck. There may be really nothing you could do about it. And that may be a reality if there is something like that. Right now, there's zero evidence to support that there is something out there. There really isn't. It's all personal evidence for everybody that's experienced it, myself included. I have some amazing video footage. I have some fantastic audio footage, but you know what? I can't put it out there as anything other than a personal experience. It's just something that I caught and I think is kind of odd, but I would never go out and preach that this is proof of the afterlife. I don't know that. It's just a personal experience.
Okay, well, let me do one last argument for the Ghost Box, okay? There's been a lot of times that we've used it, and what I feel that the spirit's talking back to me is cursed, okay? I've been called a bitch. I've been called all kinds of names. Now, the FCC, as I understand, does not allow those words on the radio. So how are these words coming across?
Again, how do you know you heard what you heard?
I mean,
it's very easy. I mean, it's very easy to be fooled. It's very easy to hear something and think you're hearing. You know what the problem was, and this was the main focus of my linguistics paper that I published, was that without context, the human mind does not understand words very well. You walk in and you have a beginning of a conversation, you'll be able to understand words and phrases and such that are spit out because they have a context and relation. But if you have just a word or a random phrase that spits out in the middle of something without a context, you're going to apply it to the context of your environment, and you're going to hear something that sort of relates to what you're doing in that area. That's just the way the human mind works. It's how we communicate, because we need to understand people when they're talking to us. So you're going to hear something, and you're going to apply it to where you're at and what you're doing or what you think might be going on, and it's even subconsciously, things that you might be feeling or wishing would happen, or secret thoughts that you might have had about why there's a spirit there, or maybe they're angry, and you're going to apply that to it. Now, I'm not saying you didn't hear what you heard, because I wasn't there. I mean, that's your personal experience, of course. I'm not going to, but my question, I've encountered a lot of people that claim they hear one thing and they don't hear it at all. And I've tested it. I've proven that people do not hear what they're thinking, especially even when we were controlling it and actually spitting out words that we knew what were being said. And that recent study, it's called, let me see, the name of it is auditory pareidolia. You might want to check it out on the Pierian element. It's the effect of contextual priming.
I read it yesterday.
Oh, okay, cool. But that's the idea. It's, you're going to hear what you want to hear, ultimately, in spite of yourself, even if you're not trying to. It has nothing to do with dishonesty or stupidity or any of those types of things. It's just the way the human mind works. And you have to question yourself. If you're thinking you're hearing this, you have to have some way of validating it. So when I do recordings or when I get EVPs, if they're clear enough, I do phonetic analysis on them, and I pull out every vowel and every consonant in graph form. I use the formant lines and the phonetic structure compared to formant charts, and I prove on paper what it's saying rather than listening to my own ears. We did that with one particular case with a child's voice with an English brogue. I was able to identify that he had an English brogue, and I was also able to identify a phrase that he said, "Mama, I'm watching," because it was so crystal clear. The rest of it was too fuzzy to evaluate, but I identified it as articulated voice. And it's one of the most impressive things I've recorded in the group. Well, I didn't record it. Somebody in the group recorded it, but that we have, I should say, for evidence. And I don't know what the rest of it's saying. I could take guesses all day long, but I do know it said the phrase, "Mama, I'm watching." And what is it? I don't know. That's the thing. You got to be okay with saying I don't know. That's we don't have to have answers for everything. At least, right? We're not on a deadline to find out answers. It's not a comet coming to the Earth, and we got to find them all out before it gets here. We just take it one by one and see what happens.
Well, okay. Well, getting back to the name calling and that, I mean, other people have heard it at the same time. It's not just my single personal experience. I mean, Anthony's heard it. And going back to a particular location that we went to, there is a scream that occurs. And we've heard it. We've heard it with our own ears. We've heard it on recording. And then again, other people in that same location they've heard the same scream. So
that's recording. I think you may be mixing the Ghost Box and an EVP.
And also, Luci, the Ghost Box changes frequencies on a set interval. You could be hearing parts of a word that happen to sound like a swear or a curse. There's a lot of words that have swear words as a part of the phonetic structure of a full word. Like class. There's those kind. You could be hearing pieces of words that just happen to sound like cuss words.
Okay.
Well, Michael, what advice do you want to tell people who are still using the Ghost Box and don't want to give it up, or don't want to see what you see and don't want to believe what you've actually just explained tonight?
Well, I don't want to discourage people from having their own beliefs. That's not what my whole thing is about. I'm not about, it's fine to have personal beliefs, but what I would want to encourage is just do research and question everything, even if it's just for yourself. You don't need to have a million discussions with people. Everything that you think that you know about something, find ways to test it and prove it. To yourself, at least. Know that what you're saying is what you have or you're experiencing is real. It's going to mean a lot more to you if you can validate those things. But if it comes down to, no, I just believe it and I don't need to prove it, then really there's no reason to be researching in the first place. If you believe it, you don't need to research.
Sure.
Well, let's see. Hold on one second. Now, you must be monitoring. Yes, dear. No, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say this. There was actually a study that actually kind of supported that there was a statement by a man named Konstantin Radev. He wrote a book called Breakthrough, and he had a statement that actually goes along the lines of what you were saying. And I have a quote here from it. It was actually in his book. It's on page 8. It says, the essence of the voices can be gleaned from their acoustically perceptible appearance and from insight into the meaning of their utterances. Rather than through psychological knowledge, they are an acoustic fact and need no special theories to confirm them. And so he wrote a whole book about this. It's called Breakthrough. It was very interesting, from 1971. But the problem is his perspective implies that the use of technical equipment and the act of recording per se results in scientifically sound evidence for EVP, despite the fact that the attitude and approach significantly lacked other key values of science, especially skepticism and emphasis on eliminating rival explanations for, things of observed nature as such. So it's looking at those types of books and taking a critical approach to what he's saying will help you understand your own perspectives a little bit better. If it's harder to discount your own thoughts on it and research, or just question your thoughts, not discount. That was the wrong word to say. Questioning your own thoughts. Try finding someone with similar views and questioning them. Believe it or not, it works. It takes the personal element out of it, and you're able to think more clearly when you're critiquing somebody else's work, and then you can apply the results to your own beliefs.
Okay. Well, Michael, you must be monitoring the equipment that's out there, and in doing so, testing its reliability. Where do you see new technology headed? Do you see a trend or a leaning towards a certain area for new equipment?
Well, yeah, I think it's going to go a lot more software-based than it was before. And, I think that the audio devices are just going to, what I see is EVP is going to hang around for quite a long time. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. The Ovilus-type device, I think is going to eventually fade off. The one that just spits out pre-recorded words, I think those are going to go away. And I think the radio station broadcasts, I think that's here to stay for a little while. We're in that phase where it's going to hang out. But it's going to go more software-based, I think, is what's going to happen.
Well, Michael, as usual, you are a wealth of knowledge, and you are so fascinating to talk to. What's coming up for you in the future? Any idea for a book coming soon?
Well, yeah, actually, I've been working on a bunch of books, believe it or not. They're all differently. There's one that I've been working on for years called The E Factor. It's pretty fat right now, but I'm not ready to close it up yet. And there's another book that I'm working on called Giving Up the Ghost, and it's about critical thinking in these types of scenarios. So I'm excited about that, and I've been having a lot of fuel for it lately with this perception research. So that's been exciting. And right now I'm working also on automation. I made a robotic device to go into a location and just sit there and record data from multiple places and transmit it back to me via a website, and so I can monitor places for weeks at a time instead of overnight. And that's actually showing some promise. And I'm also working on infrasound measurements, which really fascinates me. And also electromagnetic fields. I'm working on the current experiment that's going on right now is tying Dr. Persinger's work to home environments. For example, everybody who talks about EMF in the field of paranormal research always references Dr. Persinger, how they create temporal lobe epilepsy and God helmet and all that. And his research is fantastic. I don't have, it's not a problem with that. But the one thing that's never been done is nobody's ever looked for the element that Persinger used to trigger these anomalies in a home to find where they're naturally occurring, if they are. Because the whole argument that people are having these hallucinations based on electromagnetic stimulation is really moot if you can't find samples of the elements that trigger these activities in a home. So we're actually taking measurements. I have people in Europe, in England, taking measurements for me in a bunch of different places, and we're doing it throughout the United States and mostly in Massachusetts and in New England area. But we're going to try to find the frequencies, which is a 40 hertz modulated phase-shifted frequency that persons are used to trigger this activity. We're going to try to find locations that have this in a home and see if we can get people to trigger by creating perfect conditions without the helmet to see if people do have experiences. So we're going to be calling for volunteers and all that kind of stuff in the near future. So I'm excited about that because I would love to be able to tie that together. It's a missing piece that has never been really put into place.
That sounds really exciting. Michael, where can our listeners go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, the Pierian Element, Pierian element.com, the Pierian Element, or you can go to kneecaps.org, NECAPS.org. All the research is listed in both places, but most of the up-to-date stuff daily comes out at the Pierian Element. And I welcome all comments. There's places on there too, comments and questions and everything. Even opposing views, I'm always interested to hear because, science is about listening to all angles. You need to listen to all pieces in order to make discoveries and understand things. So my door's open.
Well, thank you again, Michael. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's been a great pleasure, Lucy. Thank you.
Absolutely fascinating, Michael. Thank you for coming on. And we're going to be linking your website on our Facebook page. So for those of you listening, you can also check out our Paranormal Review radio page on Facebook for the links to Michael's website. So thank you again, Michael, and have a great weekend. We're going to be following any of your new studies, and we're going to be reading more of those articles, those awesome articles. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
All righty.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Michael.
So, Luci, did you actually hear what you heard?
Yes, I did. I'm not giving up my ghost box. I'm sorry. The experiences that I've had with that ghost box, I don't understand the scientific basis behind it. I don't understand how it works. And I do admit that there's a lot that I don't know. But on a whole, with the paranormal and experiences, there's a lot that we don't know, that we can't quantify or prove, because we don't know what is going on the other side. So part of my refusal to give up stuff like the ghost box, with that in particular, I can't speak for everything because I absolutely agree with you on these computer apps. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how they work and seeing if they're really true. I'm not convinced. But as far as the ghost box goes, I mean, there are things on the other side that we don't understand. And I don't believe the same rules that we use on this side may pertain to what's happening on the other side. We can have all the documentation and understand how everything works, how the ghost box work, radio frequencies, but I don't believe that those rules may pertain to what's happening on the other side. We don't know what they're capable of. I don't think they sit down and analyze the frequencies or anything like that. I don't think it's like that. But again, I don't know. But I'm still not giving up my ghost box.
I did want to answer Miss A. Marie. She posted in chat, and she wanted to ask about Echovox. I did see your post in chat, Miss A. Marie. Don't think that we were ignoring you. But Echovox is similar to the Ovilus, and Michael had talked about the Ovilus and the issues or the concerns that he had with it, in which he actually created his own, and he talked about it tonight, how he created his own, and actually I think he said he added now audio to it, so you can actually hear the word as well as see it on the screen. It's a software that he created, and he had it playing just tonight as he and his wife were watching television, and supposedly it was saying sort of relevant words to what they were watching on TV. So, but he did sort of go into the whole idea that it's still a randomness of words that are being spewed out that we then just interpret and correlate it to our surroundings, and we familiarize it with what we are trying to familiarize it with, basically. We're creating the answer. We're creating the truth. And that's what he's saying also, too, about the ghost box. Is it what, did you actually hear it? Was that the actual spirit talking to you, or was it a snippet of in-between fragments of a frequency, of a radio station? I think he's taking a much more realistic approach to the ghost box. I may not agree with everything that Michael has talked about tonight, but I do agree with his sense of method in how he goes about trying to either prove or disprove what is out there. And if the ghost box, for what I understand, many people, and you just have said it tonight, Luci, you don't even know how it works. And so I think that's, to me, is one of the major issues, that how could you believe in something that you don't even know how it even works? It's almost like my issue that I have, that how could I believe in a religion if I can't believe in the pieces that are in this holy book? So it to me, it just doesn't make sense that you're utilizing something that you don't even know how it works or how it goes about gathering the spirit voices, and therefore automatically you're believing it because you feel as though that it is responding. And it may give intelligent responses to you, and I've heard, answers, but again, it goes back to what Michael was saying. Did you actually hear what you heard? Was it a spirit, or was it a fragmented voice that had been demodulated coming from some disc jockey at a radio station in Ohio?
Okay, well, in answer to that, I can't answer the logical side of it, but I've had experiences with that ghost box. And this was way back when we went to the Stanley Hotel. And I got an English voice that came out of the ghost box. What are the chances of a radio station broadcasting with an English voice? Who knows? Maybe there could have been. I still believe that the paranormal defies logic. And I totally appreciate what Michael's doing. He's taking the logical, scientific view of things. It's looking for proof. But there are certain instances, and maybe there's not a whole lot of them. And I do understand what he said about, you have to have the same responses or the same results in order to define it. I think the paranormal cannot, how do I put this? I think the paranormal is sometimes beyond logic. I think there's something there that is totally unknown that we may not be able to prove by science. I know that here, in this realm, on this earth, in our reality, that in order to say something is definitively happening, we have to document it and have that proof. I believe that the paranormal is beyond that. I think that there are things that happen on the other side that we truly cannot define. But if I don't have proof, if I can't put it on a piece of paper and I can't dissect it, I'm not willing to let go of that. You're giving me that look.
No, I'm not. No, I'm trying to formulate a response to it, but that response that you just gave, it's almost a stubbornness feel. I'm not willing to give it up because of my belief, and therefore that if there's anything out there that comes forward that negates it, you still won't give it up because of your belief in it. And I think that's where the problem is in researchers or people who claim to be researchers, that they're just debating the reality of what is proven to be, I guess, non-existent or not on the same parallel lines as your thoughts and your theories, and therefore it's just being pushed aside. I agree with you that, science and the paranormal, I don't think will. First of all, I don't think will ever be mixed. There's no way that you can contain paranormal to be studied and experimented upon and analyzed. I think it is beyond the realm of human nature. It is not meant to be that way. I believe that 100%. So therefore, to me, science will never prove that the afterlife exists. So therefore, anything that negates the paranormal from a scientific view should just be discarded. No, I don't have that sense, because in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm a rational person, I'm thinking that there may be some points that I can take from, for example, Michael's cases that make sense. And it does make sense to me when he started to explain that, well, if a spirit could speak through and go through these frequencies and be demodulated so that therefore we can hear it through our own ears, then why couldn't a spirit then just take over a radio station? Why couldn't we flip through and slowly go through and see if we could find a station or frequency that tunes into it that is just easily there for the spirit to just talk? Why do they have to fight so much to get a word in between these rapidly moving tuning stations? To me, it doesn't make sense. And therefore, I have to question it. I'm not sort of questioning the validity of the ghost box and the idea of what a ghost box can do. I'm sort of questioning, well, yeah, if they can do that, well, why can't it just be easy? If they could do that, why can't it just be on one station?
I see your question, but I don't know. I don't know why they would just not pick one station. I just think that when they're on the other side, I believe it is energy. I believe that the energy is, it just seems to be, maybe it's the easiest way for that energy to come across to this side. Again, I'm saying I don't understand, and I'm not gonna discount what Michael's saying. I do understand his side of it and how he's trying to prove, and I understand the scientific rules and the documentation and being able to take that data gives proof. But again, I just feel like the paranormal is something that I don't think we're ever going to really truly be able to sit down and document it and say, well, here's it's like geometry. You have your set facts, and when these facts always come together, they always equal this. And I don't think the paranormal is like that. I don't think the paranormal is going to be like, well, every time this happens, this will always happen. I think it's different. And the very fact that spirits, what I have come to believe, they're us. We would, in essence, be the same thing on the other side that we are here. So if you're stubborn and you've got people asking you questions, and when you were alive, you didn't want to answer, who's to say that they're on the other side and they want to answer you anyway, that they're going to respond? Which, to me, kind of explains to me why some people can go to a location, get responses, and then other people can go to the same location on a different night and not get anything.
Well, that's all about intention.
Well, yeah, and intention might have a lot to do with it. You could have someone go in and they're demanding to be talked to, and they're demanding responses. Either
right,
on this side or the next. I would not answer. So therefore, when he's saying that, you should be able to go into a location and get the same responses all the time, it may not happen that way. I mean, there's so many other variables that are going to affect what you're going to get. The weather, the location. And I do understand the fact that you have to take everything into account, the conditions of the building, the weather, the moon, all of these things come into play. But yet, with the ghost box, what I'm hearing, and I understand what they're saying, we're not hearing well, maybe I don't understand. The statement is that we're not hearing what we're hearing. Then otherwise, then everything that we hear and everything that comes out of the ghost box and all of these experiences, we just throw them out the door because we don't have the proof. And it's not happening every single time. I can't get that. I don't get that.
Well, he's basically what he's doing is he's coming from a scientific mind, and for anything to be proven to be truth, or to be true, or to be accurate and proven, you have to have a scientific method, and the scientific method is that there has to be repeated results, and the repeated results have to be the same. And so that's what he means by you have to go into a location and have repeated results, and it has to become the same thing. So if you bring that ghost box into, Sodomsville Rectory, night after night after night after night, that ghost box should be not repeating the same words or the same responses, but you should be able to get the same spirits every single time and answering the same way. Meaning, if you ask the question, did you kill John Smith? And the first night you received a yes, I did, and you ask that question on the second night in the same location, you should be able to get that same response, yes, I did. Now, as you were going back and you were saying, well, sometimes they answer, sometimes they don't. They're a human being, they're just dead. So whether or not they want to answer you that next day or not, they choose not to, or they choose to do that. And so I understand your point of view as well, that you necessarily can't have a repeated result to justify or to satisfy a scientific method to be considered to be a proven theory. So I completely get that. I completely understand it, and that's why we still use the ghost box. That's why I still use it. The one problem that I have with this whole thing is, and Michael mentioned it, that we're sort of leaning towards the app thing and getting into the software side of things. That's where I'm having a problem with, because that's where things can become more manipulated. I will tend to believe more of this raw audio that comes out of a physical radio. That's, the radio could be manipulated to be for the dial to speed through all of the channels, and that's it. And I would be able to believe if there was a voice that came through that type of equipment. But if you have something that is a ghost app or ghost box app, it's on a computer, to me that's not raw. That's actually biased and manipulated even more, because you are creating the database. Just as Michael said, there would be a bank of words of, say, 1,000 words in a bank somewhere, and if you are a spirit, you're only allowed to use those words to communicate. And so how can you truly communicate when you're only able to choose those words, if in fact that ghost box app works? Now, I mentioned also, too, that a lot of these ghost apps are linking to online radio stations that are geared towards the paranormal. And so within these radio stations, these recorded radio stations, obviously if they're talking about the paranormal, they're going to bring up things of the nature within the phenomenon. And they're going to have words of spirit and devil and demon, possessed, and, you may hear even recorded responses of EVPs that, clearly say get out and all this other stuff. And so when these apps link to that radio station and it quickly runs through all of them, and you get that word get out, which could have been a recording that somebody was playing as evidence on a radio show, you're going to take that as factual, as a response to something. And that I have a problem with. That I don't understand how that can be something that someone can say is truthful or is a truthful response within the paranormal.
Well, Sapphire just put it in the chat room, and I agree with him totally. As a programmer, those apps are suspect. And just in my limited computer background, a computer is only going to work with what you put into it, the programs that you put into it, the data that you enter into it. So therefore, those apps I do have a problem with. Now, something else that they mentioned, like going to the same location and getting the same response from a ghost box. I agree with Kale. Kale was saying that, spirits may not necessarily stay in the same location. And I believe that. I believe that, now I don't have proof, but I do believe that spirits may not necessarily be tied to a single location. So if spirits, in essence, have this ability to move back and forth, then you may not get the same responses. One thing I want to bring up, like when we do the live ITC session, responses that we get, we're not in the location that these places, we try to contact Jeffrey Dahmer, and we got a couple things that I can't say for sure it was Jeffrey, but just say for the sake of argument that we did contact Jeffrey. We were not in his location. We were not in any location. You were there in New York. I'm here in Chicago. How can we get a response if it truly was a response? I think that spirits do have the ability to move from place to place. They're not encumbered by a human body. They're not encumbered by the physical need to move one foot, in front of the other in order to get to a different spot. I believe they're energy, and I believe energy can travel back and forth. That part I do believe. So I don't necessarily believe that the same responses are going to come out of that ghost box in the same location all the time.
Yeah, but you just talked about, one of the shows that we did with Jeffrey Dahmer. How do we know that that's not a case of pareidolia? How do you know that that's not a case of us trying to, as Michael was just talking about tonight, the idea that we're if you go out to search for ghosts and spirits, you're going to find it. You're going to formulate a response or an actual reaction to the surroundings that you're at and create the experience basically, and formulate the idea that you've spoken to a spirit or a spirit has spoken to you simply because you are picking and choosing, you're cherry picking it. And so was it a case of pareidolia that within the spirit box, and as the spirit box was going, there were other words that were coming through. There were other, sounds that were coming through that radio station, but we didn't connect with it because either it wasn't making sense or it was going too fast. And as soon as we hit a word that related to what we were talking about, did we in fact relate it legitimately to the idea that we were talking to Jeffrey Dahmer?
No, we didn't.
Yes, we did. I think we did, and that was the case. And so we brought it up, and that's why what I'm saying is I don't know whether or not you can put, a valid period at the end of that sentence that the ghost box is truthful because, and again, it goes back to what Michael was saying. How do you know exactly what you heard? Did you actually hear what you heard? And so was it the fact that I cherry-picked that word out or you cherry-picked that word out because it was relevant to what we were just talking about, and therefore we equate it to, we just spoke to Jeffrey Dahmer. That was a response.
Well, okay, I take one experience that I had, and don't ask me why. I just happened to have a ghost box with me. I had gone to a cemetery, and this person had wanted to visit the gravesite of family. I, moved out of the way, walked away so that, to give them privacy. And I just happened to pull out the ghost box, and I said a quick prayer. I said a Hail Mary. Turned the ghost box on, and I get the response, thank you. I wasn't looking for that. It just came out, and I heard the word thank you. So by going with Michael's, statement that, or theory about pareidolia, was I looking for that? Subconsciously, I was looking for a thank you when I said the prayer. I mean, I can remember not consciously thinking anything, just saying the prayer, turning the box on, and then I get a response, thank you. It's just little instances like that.
What's the probability of hearing the word or the phrase thank you on a radio station? You can probably hear that every 5 seconds. A disc jockey saying thank you to a guest, a DJ saying thank you to its listeners. It just, the probability of it being a response is too high to consider it a legitimate response or communication to a spirit. That, I don't want to argue, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You and I debate a lot about these things. It's a healthy debate. It's a good way to sort of stir up the juices and get everybody thinking about things, because you never know what you thought you believed in before, you may not believe in after a discussion with someone. And so this is a good way to sort of create that dialogue together. So I play devil's advocate, and you know me, I play I play the courtroom. I'm both lawyers in the courtroom, and I play both sides constantly all the time, just so that it satisfies my curiosity to find out whether or not what I'm seeing or what I'm doing is believable. And so if the idea of this response, thank you, is coming through, well, okay, in reality, can thank you be heard on the radio? Yes, it can be. Can it be a snippet that has, once this radio frequency is sweeping through, could we have picked up a DJ just saying thank you? Yes, we could have. Could it have been a spirit saying thank you? Probably, maybe, but the probability of it is much higher than the DJ. And so, therefore, the balance, that scale, is not level. It's way off. And so I lean towards the idea that I don't put the validity into the ghost box because there are so many other variables out there that I can say could be the reason of why that's happening. And that's why I'm in this position where I'm at right now, where I don't just believe because I believe, because I have a feeling. I don't do that. That's not me.
And I agree with you that you have your belief, and I appreciate that. But see, I'm thinking, well, what's the probability of that thank you coming across at that particular time when someone's asking a question or someone's making a statement and you get a response? What's the probability of that particular phrase coming through? And then another thing, just this last investigation, we got a voice out of the ghost box that you yourself said that sounds like your voice.
Right.
How does that happen? I mean, those are the things that I truly don't understand.
Right. And again, I think it may be the pareidolia case where the voice seemed similar, and so I equated it to my voice because it sounded like me. Was it a spirit interpreting me? Could be. I don't know. But I immediately thought of it that way. I was just on Red Phantom, who's in chat right now, and I was just on his show, The Whatcast, and we were talking about our investigation at Sedansville, and I had talked about the whole flashlight sessions that people do and that we've done. Now, the two things that I have usually a problem with are the ghost box, not a problem with, but to be 100% believable, I don't have is within the ghost box and the whole flashlight thing. Now, we've done both of those things many, many times before. Now, the flashlight thing, I understand the mechanics of it, where you're loosening up the flashlight so that the innards are barely touching. There's a whisper in between whatever those two mechanisms are, the battery and that coil or whatever it is, are barely touching. There's a whisper. So that if there is, and now this is the scientific side of it, if there's any sort of vibration and any movement, it could be wind even, environmental, that will flicker that at the slightest touch to cause the electricity to run through and create that flashlight to go on. Now, I get that part of it, but as I was explaining on the Whatcast to Mateo and Mike, was that I can't wrap my head around the idea of when we're asking it questions that it's responding to it with the flashlight turning on and off, and especially the case when we were at Pottstown where it was doing it to the melodies of the music, and it wasn't on the ground where the music was being played so that the music was vibrating and creating the flashlight to go with its melody. And so we established that part of it. So that's the part I don't understand. And so that's the conflict that I have. And so therefore, because I'm on the two sides of that fence, I can't sit comfortably with it. That's where I'm at, and that's why I sort of debate a lot of these things.
Mhm. And I agree with you. I mean, I know that you take the more logical side of things, and I have a tendency to go with what's happening. I'm usually in the moment, and it's usually like, okay, wow, that was the spirit. And I do agree. You are the one that keeps my feet on the ground. You are the one that makes me stop and think rather than run with it and say, this is this. But on the other hand, I've had enough experiences with that ghost box that things have come through that I can't see a logical explanation. Now, Michael has given me a little bit more ammunition to think about it, especially along the lines of the pareidolia. But there's so many things that I've heard, even without a ghost box, just out of, the air that I've heard with my own ears that really, really do sound like a voice, and they really do sound like something specific. And I'm thinking in terms of like Penhurst, the EVP that we got, when I'm going up the stairs and I'm not asking any questions, and there's a voice that comes through on the EVP that says hide. There's just so many things that I cannot explain, which leads me back to my initial statement. I think the paranormal is beyond science. I think there are going to be so many things that we cannot prove because we really don't know what's going on the other side. We don't know their capabilities, and the only way, and you've said this before, we're not going to know until we are on the other side.
Right, I completely agree, and that in essence is our journey that we take every single day. That's our plight for the truth in the existence of the afterlife. That's the debate that we constantly have with other people and with ourselves. It's the constant questions that pop up. It's the constant new questions that pop up every time you have a new answer. So it's almost like a never-ending story. Not an 80s movie, but it's like a never-ending story. So, the idea that or not the idea, not the issue, not the problem. I'm having trouble with words tonight. But what I'm trying to get at is I lean towards Michael's way of thinking because it's rational, because it's logical, and because it's real and pure. Even though it's a little, in my book, it may be a little bit misguided because of the idea that if we're talking about the paranormal, we have no idea how it works at all. We have no idea how spirits work and move and communicate and all that other stuff. So who knows? They could be able to tap into that high frequency, and we're just stupid to realize that. But the idea to be stubborn and to be sort of blocking all of that information out because of a perception and a belief that one has, I think that's wrong. I think that's where we're going in a wrong path. And I think that's why people should be more open to it. I mean, if you call yourself a researcher and you call yourself an investigator, then you got to be open to all the evidence that's out there. If you don't believe in something, then make it a point to try and negate it and prove it wrong or debunk it to prove your point. But you have to come with the tools and the knowledge prepared to do that. And so, therefore, you can't come to a debate without any backup. You wouldn't do that if you were on stage somewhere. And so the same thing applies to this. If you're going to debate or debunk someone's idea because it's a scientific idea and because paranormal and science doesn't mix really, well, okay, I get it, but take into account the consideration of those theories and see if whether or not any of it makes sense and point out where you think it doesn't and not just say, no, it can't because it's paranormal. No, it can't because it's paranormal. No, it can't because it's paranormal. The idea with the ghost box, too, and this is one of the problems that I have, and I'm sure a lot of people have this problem. When you play the ghost box, to me, after 5 minutes, I want to ram my head into a wall because of the sounds and that noise that comes through. It gets into my skin, and it almost it almost creates like a trance-like feeling. And I think that is the nature of it also as well, where it plays into the abilities of whether or not you're hearing what you're hearing. And, you know, after 5-10 minutes of that static noise and you know, these little spurts of words or noises or phrases or whatever it is, music, whatever it is that pops up, it sometimes, and I've seen this on even television shows, where people are not hearing it. It's almost as if they're only then tuning to a response specifically to the question that they have, and are not really, or are mixing the white noise and words together. I've seen that a lot, where they mix that and create a word. And it's almost plain as day when you can tell it's the static white noise and some garbled whatever, and it creates a word. And I think that also, too, has something to do with it. And that trance-like, you know, I don't know, stage that you're in at that point, it almost takes you away from the reality of where you're at.
I don't know. There's so much that I don't know, but I see what you're saying. You know, I can't discount the scientific side of it and the theories that they have. But I still believe in the ghost box. I mean, I do. I mean, I hear what I hear. And if it's something that I think I'm hearing, then that part about it, I don't know. The next time we do a ghost box session, I'm going to ask them if they know how this works and if they are modulating the frequency.
Well, no, don't do it through a ghost box session. Do it through an EVP session. Maybe you'll get a clearer response.
Well, I mean, I've got the recorders going all the time when we do the ghost box session. That's how, and see, that's the thing. If it's something that we think that we're hearing, and when you record it and you play it for someone else, why is it that they hear the same thing?
Well, in actuality, are we actually hearing that word? Or are we hearing a snippet of a longer word? You know, as he was talking about, you know, the word class. You know, are we just getting the end part when it says ass because it's sweeping through the radio frequency? Is it actually what we're hearing? I mean, he makes a good point.
Well, okay, so how does the word bitch come across? I don't know I mean, is someone on a radio station saying witch at that particular moment? You know? Or
ditch, you know, maybe they were digging a ditch somewhere and you know, because the word popped through as it was sweeping, D could be configured as B and said it. Who knows, you know? Or it could be a spirit calling you a bitch.
Which I haven't. And it usually only happens in the locations, like it happened at Eastern State Penitentiary. Take into account the people that technically would be there, you know, that you would assume that would be there. It didn't happen in Valeska. It didn't happen in other places. It happened in a prison. I don't know. Like I said, you know, I have no answers, but I'm very willing to listen to other sides. That's part of my learning process, and I understand what was said tonight. I still have a slight problem, you know, dealing with it.
Has anything changed tonight after hearing Michael talk?
Maybe the part about being more careful about what I hear.
Okay.
But
well, I mean, that's a good thing. It's a good start at least. At least you'll be more conscious about what's coming through and deciphering whether or not that's the actual word or is it the actual response that you're getting.
Yeah, I think I'll be more. I'll maybe be a little bit more. Pay more attention to what's coming out, just to make sure that I'm hearing what I'm hearing.
All right, good. So, that's the only thing that we can ask, and that's obviously something that I've asked myself for tonight, was to, not be biased, be a little bit more open to what Michael is talking about, and learn from his research and read his articles. Pierianelement.com is it's a great website. I mean, I'm a paranormal nerd. I like to, really do a lot of research and read a lot of stuff. So if you're really into that, go to the Pierian Element and Pierianelement.com and check out some of those case studies and articles that he posts up there. They're truly amazing. Or you can actually go to necaps.org, and they've got, I forgot where it is, but there's like a plethora of psychoanalytical, scientific articles, case studies, experiments, all of this stuff on all of the different areas within the paranormal that are really interesting to read upon and educate yourself, whether it is to validate your theories and your own personal thoughts, or if you have a question about something that you're not sure of, you can actually go to these articles and case studies and see for yourself and read for it. It's not his own or anything like that, or I think some of them are, or most of them are, or half of them are, something like that. But a lot of them are, real legitimate cases that have been, viewed by peers and have gone through the gamut of being criticized and then proven. So it's a worthwhile trip to check out his website. So
I've done it.
Check it
I've read some of them. Okay, so let's move on. We got 4 minutes left. Let's go to the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week. And this week, it's from YouTube. It is Rex Michaels from Monterey, California. He's one of our YouTube listeners, and he has commented and shared our videos. So thank you, Rex, for being a fan. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rex. And if you guys want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, just like us on Facebook or subscribe to us on YouTube at Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, as paranormal investigators, what is the evidence that we gather? Is it what proves the existence of life after death? When the evidence we present cannot be proven, it really doesn't help us to prove what many of us know is true. While the ghost box is entertaining, can it truly be used as proof of contact? As we move forward and continue to look for answers, we do owe it to ourselves and the community to look at all the possibilities. We each have our own truth, but before we convince others of what we've experienced, we have to have something that we can definitely say is proof of the afterlife. Without it, it's always just going to be our own personal experience. We do want to thank Michael for joining us tonight. As always, it was a thought-provoking conversation. Now, one of the most controversial topics that people talk about is whether or not we're getting the real story when a news story is reported. 26 people, 20 students and 6 adults were shot and killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14th. What exactly happened during this horrific event? Was it a staged media hoax? Many inconsistencies surround the shooting. Were we told the truth about what happened? Peter Klein is one of the contributors to a documentary called We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook. It is a collaborative documentary by independent journalists that looks at Sandy Hook. The goal of the documentary is full disclosure of the events that took place that day. Peter will be joining us next Friday night to discuss the film and how we may not be getting the full story from mainstream media. It is a subject that we all need to think about, so you don't want to miss this show. Please join us. Thank you, everyone, for being here and supporting us. You truly are some of the most intelligent, open-minded people on the planet, and we are grateful that you listen to our show. Thank you, Anthony, for all that you do to make this show what it is, the best 2 hours of my week. So, until next week, Parapeeps, keep your eyes and ears open to the truth and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio.